No machines could reach the fractured cliffs of Black Canyon in 1931. So desperate men volunteered to dangle 800 feet over the Colorado River, armed with nothing but a rope, a wooden plank, and a jackhammer nearly half their body weight. They were called high scalers. For $7 a day, they faced a fall that would last 7 seconds, long enough to realize there was no return. How do you convince someone to step backward into that much nothing? The legend begins with the impossible problem nobody else would solve. Black Canyon was a fortress of volcanic rock, rising nearly 800 feet straight up from the Colorado River. The walls weren't solid. They were riddled with cracks, seams, and boulders barely clinging to the face. Geologists warned that thousands of tons of fractured basalt could break loose at any time. Even a single falling stone dropped from that height would strike the ground with the force of a rifle shot. A rock slide could bury crews alive in seconds. Before a single bucket of concrete could be poured, every ounce of loose rock had to be stripped from the cliffs. Engineers studied the problem from every angle. Cranes couldn't reach across the abyss, scaffolds would collapse under their own weight or be swept away by the wind. No machine could grip the canyon face and survive the constant risk of avalanche. The cliffs were too steep, the stone too unpredictable, the danger too immediate. The only answer was men, not just any men, but workers willing to trust their lives to a single rope anchored at the rim. They would have to descend by hand, carrying jackhammers and dynamite, and clear the walls one boulder at a time. It wasn't just dangerous. It was a gamble with odds no machine would ever take. Every decision came down to risk. Leave the loose rock, and the dam's foundation would never be safe. Send men over the edge, and every shift became a test of nerve and skill. The scale of the hazard was almost impossible to grasp. Sheer cliffs, fractured stone, and no margin for error. The only thing standing between disaster and progress was a line of men hanging between sky and stone, doing the job no machine could touch. A high scaler's morning began with a ritual that tested the limits of trust. At the canyon rim, a length of manila rope no thicker than a man's thumb waited, anchored to the bare rock above. The only seat was a wooden plank, 24 inches long and 6 inches wide, drilled at the corners for the rope to pass through. This was the bosun's chair, borrowed from the world of sailors and riggers, but stripped of every safeguard. There was no harness, no net, no backup line. Every knot and splice had been checked by eye, tightened by hand, and trusted to hold the full weight of a man, his tools, and the day's work. Veteran scalers showed new hires the basics: loop the rope through a friction hitch, grip the line with one hand, and settle onto the plank. The descent began with a backward step, boots at the rim, heels searching for the edge. Gravity took over, and the world dropped away. The only control came from the friction hitch, a simple twist of rope that let a man ease himself down the cliff face or clamp tight in an instant. The body leaned back at a 45-degree angle, feet pressed flat against the rock, eyes fixed on the dizzying sweep of empty space below. The air was full of sound, wind whistling, distant shouts, the clatter of steel against stone. The rope creaked and stretched, every fiber alive with tension. Sometimes a gust would send a man swinging out from the wall, spinning slowly over the abyss. Newcomers froze mid-descent, hands locked on the line, legs shaking. It took a steady voice from above or a joke from a partner nearby to coax them down the rest of the way. There was no room for mistakes. If the rope frayed, if a knot slipped, if the anchor pulled loose, there was nothing to catch a falling man. The only thing between a high scaler and the canyon floor was that single, sun-bleached line, trusted for one more shift to hold. A high scaler's workday was measured in minutes of muscle and nerve. Each man balanced on his plank, suspended over the canyon, with a 44-pound jackhammer slung between his knees. The drill bit hit the rock with a steady, punishing rhythm, sending shudders through boots, up legs, into the spine. Every hole took 10 to 15 minutes to carve out. Then it was time to shift, brace again, and start the next. By midday, arms and shoulders burned from the constant vibration. Fingers lost feeling, hands went numb, but the work never slowed. The echo of metal on stone bounced between the canyon walls, so loud that words vanished in the roar. Shouts turned to hand signals, a nod for more hose, a wave for help, a clenched fist to warn of trouble. Air hoses tangled around the ropes, tugged by bursts of wind, while men fought to keep their balance and keep the drill steady. The rock face was never smooth. Sometimes a foothold crumbled or a jackhammer slipped, sending a scaler swinging out into open space before the rope snapped him back. Veterans learned to move with the wall, to feel the subtle give of fractured basalt under their boots, to sense when the stone might break free. The best could judge a seam by touch alone, knowing when to ease up and when to lean in. Between drills, men pried loose debris with crowbars, working by instinct and muscle memory. The job demanded constant focus, one eye on the rock, one on the rope, always aware that a single misstep could mean disaster. Hour after hour, the grind continued, sweat soaking through shirts, the world reduced to the next hole, the next signal, the next breath. Fatigue crept in, but the work had to go on. The wall had to be cleared, no matter what it took. Dynamite shaped every hour in Black Canyon. High scalers drilled deep into the fractured walls, then packed the holes with sticks of powder, sometimes 500 pounds or more in a single day. The signal was a sharp whistle, one blast that sliced through the canyon's roar. That sound meant everything. Men dropped their tools and scrambled up their ropes, boots scraping for purchase on sun-baked stone. There were only seconds to clear the blast zone, too slow, and a car-sized boulder could shear loose, tumbling through the air with enough force to shatter bone and steel. Crews learned to move as one, no hesitation, no wasted motion. Trust ran up and down the ropes, each man depending on the next to spot trouble and shout a warning. The explosion shook the canyon from end to end. Dust rolled out in choking waves, filling mouths and lungs, settling on sweat-soaked skin. When the echoes faded, the air was thick with grit and the sharp smell of powder. High scalers swung back onto the wall, scanning for new cracks, loose rock, or sudden voids where the blast had torn away the cliff. Every shift brought fresh hazards, edges undercut by dynamite, handholds crumbling to dust, ropes frayed by flying debris. The sun pressed down with relentless weight. In summer, the canyon floor climbed past 120 degrees Fahrenheit, but the rock face itself could reach 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Touching bare stone burned through gloves in seconds. Water hauled down in canvas bags turned hot and stale almost instantly. Sweat dried before it could cool the body, leaving salt crusts on skin and lips cracked and bleeding. Dehydration set in fast and strength faded by midday. In July 1931, a heat wave so fierce claimed 16 men in a single month. There was no escape, just the work, the heat, and the knowledge that the wall would not yield easily. Every blast, every scramble, every hour in the furnace was a gamble, and every man knew the odds. Falling rocks were the silent enemy on the canyon walls. Even a pebble dropped from 800 feet could crack a skull or snap a collarbone. The first days brought a steady tally of injuries, fractured jaws, concussions, men carried away on stretchers. Helmets did not exist for construction. Most workers wore soft cloth caps, useless against stone. Then came a flash of desert ingenuity. High scalers started dipping their canvas hats in thick black coal tar and setting them out in the sun to harden. The sticky coating turned flimsy caps into crude armor, stiff and shiny but tough enough to deflect falling debris. The difference was immediate. Skull fractures dropped, swollen faces and bloody bandages became less common on the mess hall benches. Word spread up and down the ropes, and soon the whole crew was sporting tar-dipped headgear. 6 companies took notice and ordered thousands of factory-made hard hats for the site, the first mass use of safety helmets on a major American project. What started as a desperate fix in the heat of danger became standard gear, copied on job sites across the country. The hard hat legacy began not in a laboratory, but in the hands of men who refused to accept that injury was just part of the job. Oliver Cowan hung suspended hundreds of feet above the Colorado River, boots braced against fractured stone, when a sudden shout cut through the roar. Bureau engineer Burl Rutledge, checking the rim above, lost his footing and tumbled out into the void. In an instant, Cowan swung away from the rock, reached out and caught Rutledge by the leg as he plummeted past. The shock of the impact jolted both men against the wall, rope groaning under the unexpected weight, two men on one line with no margin for error. Cowan locked his arms, pinning Rutledge's body to the cliff face, muscles straining as the rope stretched and swayed. Arnold Parks, foreman and fellow scaler, scrambled down from above, gripping the line and pressing Rutledge's shoulders against the rock. For a breathless minute, all three men hung in silence, the only sound the wind and the creak of manila fibers holding their lives. A rescue line dropped from the rim, and inch by inch, Rutledge was hauled to safety, shaken but alive. Cowan and Parks stayed on the wall, hearts pounding, hands numb, knowing exactly what could have happened if the rope had failed. Trust ran deeper than fear. On that day, the high scaler's code, never let go no matter what, held true. Official records list the Hoover Dam project with 96 deaths from 1931 to 1936. The ledgers name each worker and list the date, each entry reduced to a single line in a company log. But the numbers do not tell the whole story. For every worker lost to a fall or a blast, there were others whose deaths were harder to classify and easier to overlook. In the tunnels beneath Black Canyon, gasoline trucks ran day and night. Nevada law banned gas-powered vehicles in underground mines, but 6 companies claimed a federal exemption. The tunnels filled with exhaust, and men began collapsing at their posts. Dozens died, their deaths recorded as pneumonia on the company rolls. Medical examiners rarely questioned the diagnosis, and the company had every reason to avoid the word poisoning. Historians and labor advocates have pored over those records, searching for patterns. They see a sudden spike in so-called pneumonia deaths, all clustered around the tunnel work, all in men who spent their days breathing fumes with no ventilation. At least 42 deaths fit that pattern, but not one was ever listed as carbon monoxide poisoning. The company denied any link, and the state never forced the issue. Families were left with little more than a death certificate and a few $100s if they were lucky. Some received nothing at all when the cause was disputed or the records were incomplete. The official toll became a shield, a way to contain the cost of progress. For those who study the dam's history, the gap between the company numbers and the probable reality is impossible to ignore. The question lingers: how many men gave their lives in ways that never made the ledger? The answer is lost somewhere in the dust and paperwork of Black Canyon, buried as deeply as the dam's own foundations. High scalers lived and worked in a world apart, bound together by the kind of trust that only forms when every day is a wager with gravity. In Boulder City, they bunked in crowded dormitories, swapping stories over cheap coffee and canned beans. New men eager to prove themselves were sent on wild goose chases for skyhooks or left-handed ropes, a ritual that mixed humor with a reminder you were nobody until you had survived the wall. The veterans watched closely, measuring each recruit's nerve and steadiness under pressure. Those who froze or panicked rarely lasted the week. But if you earned a place, you found a brotherhood that ran deeper than any contract. On the cliffs, the line between life and death was measured in inches of rope and seconds of reaction. Off the wall, laughter came easily. Some nights a scaler would swing out from the rim just to show off, legs dangling high above the river, calling jokes to the men below. In quieter moments, they played cards, shared cigarettes, and nursed bruises that never fully healed. The work was brutal, but the bonds were unbreakable. When one man fell, the loss rippled through the camp like a physical blow. There were no grand speeches, no official mourning, just an empty bunk and a round bought in silence at the bar. Yet for all their skill and sacrifice, the high scalers remain nearly invisible. Tourists drive across the dam, snap photos, and marvel at the concrete rising from the canyon floor, never knowing that every inch of safe foundation was cleared by men who hung in the void. There are no plaques with their names, no statues in their honor. Their legacy is hidden, set deep in the stone, remembered only in faded photographs and the stories passed down by those who still remember what it meant to trust your life to a rope and the man beside you. Today, every skyscraper, bridge, and high-rise worker owes a silent debt to those who risked everything on a single rope. Their improvised hard hats and rope techniques shape modern safety standards, yet their names remain buried in concrete. As we build ever higher, the true cost of progress, human ingenuity, and sacrifice still hangs in the balance. The canyon remembers, even if the world forgets. Share your thoughts below.